Hello, my name is Andrew, and today we're going to be discussing the topic of making decisions if you're ADHD or if you have an ADHD type personality. And this is something I've been thinking about for the past year a lot because I am someone who has made a lot of terrible decisions. I have a very non-linear thinking style. I easily get distracted and get sucked into shiny object syndrome, which is where you have a goal and then you see something else and then you're like, oh, that's my goal. And then you see something else and you're like, oh no, I've got to switch to this thing. And then you just keep switching over and over and over again and you never really accomplish anything. And I went through a really hard period with this when I was a freelancer. This is around 2015 to 2018 or so. And I just kept hopping from like one career path to another. Like first I was a copywriter, then I was a web developer, and then a designer and an illustrator. And I kept changing, my rates and the types of clients that I worked with and all of this different stuff. And I got to this point where I realized that like my portfolio was just this rat's nest and I hadn't accomplished anything. I had just gone about an inch in 1,000 different directions. So if that sounds familiar, we're gonna fix that today. And I've noticed in the past year that my decision making has improved a lot. And the main reason for that is because I've sort of adopted this very simple philosophy that is highly effective for nonlinear thinking. And it all started when I went to a dentist appointment. So basically I went in to have a cavity drilled and I'm just like sitting there and just making small talk with the dentist. And he's like, I told him, I was thinking about doing something of like drawing or comics or, that I wanted to write a book, but that I hadn't gotten around to doing it. And he's like, oh, I have the book for you. You have to read this book. It's called The One Thing. And actually, the irony is that this book is not very good, but the idea is killer. And basically how he explained it to me is that if you try to chase two rabbits, you don't catch either of them. And I realized, well, I'm not only chasing two rabbits, I'm chasing like 500 rabbits. So I just had to settle on one thing and focus all of my energy on that. So I did that and I decided to draw one comic every day for an entire year. And I published my first book, 365 Comics. And this is the first time that I actually accomplished something big, with ADHD. Because in the past I would just do like little tiny pieces of art. I'd start something, I'd get, 3 comics into a challenge and then I'd give up. And that really sucks, because in the beginning, it's just sort of like you can kind of laugh it off and maybe it's a little bit frustrating. But as you go on in life, if you continue struggling with this, like I have seen a lot of friends and family members and like where this road goes is to like depression and poverty and lack of fulfillment and getting stuck in jobs that you don't like because you can't be successful as an entrepreneur, someone that can manage yourself. So anyways, after the comics challenge, I kind of realized that this conventional idea of having multiple priorities does not work for anyone with ADHD or just creative type personality in general, or at least it doesn't work for me. But it's kind of funny because the word priority actually for a long time only existed in the singular, but it's only recently that the word priorities has come into existence because now modern life is so busy and chaotic and nonlinear. And so now we have to have this word of priorities. But anyways, I realized that what I needed to do was from then on, I would only have one goal every single year. And I would only have one goal every single month and one goal every week and one goal every day. And then even on a more granular level, only one goal for every moment. Like right now, my goal is to make this YouTube video, right? So I'm not gonna get distracted by anything else. And when you stop having multiple priorities and you just focus on the one thing that you most need to do out of everything else, it makes it very easy to make decisions. It makes it a lot easier to stay focused. And you'll see that even though it seems like it would be less productive because you're only focusing on one goal, you actually end up accomplishing a lot more because you accomplish that goal and then you can move on to something else and something else rather than trying to do everything at once. But another example of this is like in 2021, my goal was just to start a YouTube channel and start making money, which I did. I focused all my time and my energy on making YouTube videos. And my channel blew up. I went from like 0 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers. And in 3 months, I was making $300 to $1,000 on YouTube. And it was really working for me. But then in 2022, I kind of like slipped backwards. I didn't really set a goal. I sort of forgot about this philosophy of just doing one thing. And I really didn't accomplish that much. I didn't make that much money. I wasn't that happy. I was really struggling because I didn't have anything that I was working towards. I was working towards too many different things. But then in 2023, I kind of like got back on, the train, and I decided to do this challenge called Van Plan, where I saved up $5,000 to buy a van for van life, and I did it. And then in this year, my goal was to buy the van, which I also did. I've also started to build it out. And then for next year, my main goal is to finish the van build. But to go back to my original point about shiny object syndrome, you might be thinking, okay, Andrew, this idea of one thing at a time sounds really great, but how do I prevent myself from being hijacked? And how do I tell that this one thing that I've picked is actually the right thing so that I don't get confused and then, switch over to some other thing and then some other thing and some other thing? And usually the way that I do it is just thinking about like the hierarchy of needs. Like everyone's kind of familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts with your basic needs like food and shelter, and then it goes up to like self-actualization. And I think a lot of times when we get shiny object syndrome, it's because we're trying to flip the pyramid upside down, like we're trying to work on self-actualization before we've figured out food and, basic shelter and stuff like that. So when I'm trying to decide whether I'm on the right path and whether I should stay on that path versus, switch over to something new, it's always like, what thing do I need most that is at the lowest level in the pyramid? So most of the time, the things that I'm working on are just like food and shelter, right? Like my diet, investing in high quality food is always a good goal. And it's the type of goal that improves everything else. Like when you have good food, you have better energy to make better decisions and, do more things creatively, etc. So that's the place where I would always start. If you have a goal, big goal for the year, I'd always start with food if it feels like you don't have enough energy or you can't focus. And then from there, the next thing is usually like shelter. And that can mean literal shelter in the sense of not freezing to death, if you're in a cold climate, for example. But it can also be like creative shelter. So for me, after I started getting my diet figured out, or at least to the point where it felt like I had pretty good energy and I could function well, the next thing was van life, because I've been living at my mom's house for 7 years and it's very difficult to focus. So the next step for me was getting out of this distracting environment into the van where I had some place where I felt safe and creative and distraction free, and then that would open up so many other things. And that's another way you can think about it in terms of the hierarchy, is that like the things at the bottom have almost like this multiplier effect where they affect everything else. They open up so many possibilities. Like when you increase your diet, you just have so much more energy to do all kinds of things that you want to do. Whereas if you're just focusing on the things at the top, like let's say you want to buy some shiny new guitar, well, you can't take advantage of the guitar if you don't have energy, right? So it requires a lot of honesty with yourself about where your goals are on your pyramid and whether you have your food settled before you're working on something much higher. And then one last thought I have about ADHD decision making is that sometimes it can be really hard when it feels like there are outside forces that are conspiring against you to hijack your goals. Like, for example, friends and family members, like maybe they're putting responsibilities on you, or they're inviting you to do things that are going to prevent you from accomplishing your goal. And it can be uncomfortable, but in order to be successful as a creative person, as an ADHD person with ADHD type personality, you have to learn how to say no, both to yourself and to other people. And the easiest way to do this, honestly, is just to be very clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. That one big goal, usually for the year, but it could also be for the month or for the day. And when someone, whether it's you or another person, tries to put a different path in front of you, you just have to say, I'm sorry, I would love to do X, but I have this goal of Y, and if I do X, then I won't be able to accomplish Y, and then I will be, lying to myself. And although some people will get cranky with you, ultimately they're just gonna have to accept that this is the goal that you've laid out for yourself, and they're really not gonna wanna interfere with that if you're clear and articulate that this is something that's really important or even life-saving for you. So yeah, those are some of the strategies I use to make better decisions decisions as someone with ADHD type personality. But I guess one last thought that I'll leave you with is that if it feels like you are completely out of control of your life, like there are just too many outside responsibilities and stressors and stuff like that, the most important thing to remember is that if you're thinking about that pyramid, even below food and shelter is always breathing, you know? So if you can't control anything, you can always control your breath, and it doesn't cost anything. And you can always just stop and go. And once you've just taken a few seconds to calm yourself down, you will 100% make better decisions. So anyways, if you have questions about ADHD decision making, or you have strategies of your own that you think work really well, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.